Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. I am your host, Lonnie Jones. My wife Jackie and I moved to the city of Huntsville in 1986 for me to be a youth and family minister. I have been a minister since 1980. I have served in this community as a police chaplain assigned to a SWAT team since 1992, and I've been in private practice as a licensed professional counselor since 1998. I'm also an adventure educator and an avid outdoorsman. I dabble in rock climbing and I goof around with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Our life has been full of many wonderful experiences and some just outright adventures. I used to write about those things in a little church bulletin article. So now instead of asking you to read those things, we're just going to talk about them in our podcast. And as we talk about them, we're going to talk about the facts. The facts lead to concepts, and the concepts lead to application. One caveat about the facts is, for the most part, we're going to tell you the facts just as they happened. But every now and then, we're going to tell you the way other people have told us they remember it happening with a little bit of embellishment. It's all good, clean fun and for educational purposes. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy Keeping Up with Jones. Faulkner University announces a 60% tuition discount for members of the Church of Christ. Now, there are some guidelines. This 60% tuition reduction is applicable to adult undergraduate Bible degrees or graduate Bible degrees from the Curley Graduate School of Theology in the VP Black College of Biblical Studies. You must satisfy all admission requirements and maintain satisfactory academic progress. You must remain continuously enrolled, including summers, until the completion of the degree. You must provide a letter from an elder or minister, preferably on church letterhead, verifying that you're an active member of a Church of Christ congregation prior to your initial enrollment. This offer applies to adult undergraduate degrees such as biblical studies, youth and family ministry tracks, and it also includes graduate degrees. And those are the Master of Arts in Biblical Studies, the Master of Arts in Family Life Ministry, or a Master of Theology, and it also applies to the PhD in Biblical Studies. For undergraduate inquiries, please contact Adult Enrollment, 334-386-7140, 334-386-7140, or Adult Enrollment at Faulkner edu. That is Adult Enrollment at faulkner.edu. For graduate inquiries, please call 334-386-7539, 334-386-7539. Graduate enrollment at faulkner.edu. That is graduate enrollment at faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. TKM Incorporated in Moss, Tennessee is a construction company that specializes in erosion control, seeding, and soil, hydroseeding, hydromulch, minor excavation, and silt fence. They also provide traffic control and construction signs. Their business is keeping people safe, but their passion, their mission, is they wish that all men could be saved. TKM has adopted the nickname the King's Men because as they serve you, they also serve the King. If they could provide any of their services for you, please contact them at 931-243-3958. That is 931-243-3958. Or you can contact them on the net at tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. That is tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. TKM Incorporated is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Lonzo. They really were chanting my name. I was playing defensive end in a club football game, and this win would give us the championship. there was very little time on the clock, and probably there was only one play left. And it was a desperation play. They were going to have to throw a long pass. Pete Colligan and I were defensive ends, and Pete subbed in and out with one of the Cutts twins. I think Dan Cutts, maybe. Pete and I were doing push-ups between the plays. The offensive line would come to the line, and Pete and I would greet them by just simply doing push-ups, and then we'd get up and get on our three-point stance on the line, and we were ready to go. We were geeked up. The audience was screaming. I had several really good plays and had sacked a quarterback a couple of times, and it all came down to this. They snapped the ball. Pete stunted toward my gap, and the lineman hesitated and shifted his weight in that direction, and I did a spin and rolled off of his left shoulder, and it was just me and the quarterback all alone in the backfield. He was going to try that desperately long last-minute pass, and I leapt into the air. And in those days, I could jump okay for a guy that was short, but I only weighed about 145 or 150 pounds. And miracle of miracles, I swatted the ball. And I crashed into the quarterback, rolling up and landing on his head. I'd never blocked a pass before. I'd had a stellar career as a defensive end for this little club. I had caused and recovered fumbles. The aforementioned Dan Cutts one time had blocked a pass, and it landed in my arms, and I ran all the way for a touchdown. My average ball carry in my football career was 45 yards and 6 points every time. Now, that's my average. Well, Lonnie, how many times did you carry the ball? That would be one. Figures don't lie, but liars can figure. So don't ever trust statistics. Anyway, I blocked this pass, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I think I just won a championship. The flag, the little yellow despicable things that those nasty little people in the striped jerseys wear, the flag was for roughing the passer. And the penalty for roughing the passer on this particular occasion was they're going to get to run the play again, and there's no time on the clock. And this time the pass was complete. Well, I think I just cost us the championship. My friend Robert Swain was in the crowd. Robert was watching this particular football game because after this football game, we were going to my home in Oxford, Alabama. I had promised Robert that, hey, when I play this game, we'll go home to Oxford and I'll take you rappelling up on Cheehaw Mountain. Now, there are places to rappel around where we went to school, but I'd talked so much about Cheehaw that Robert wanted to see it. He wanted to experience it. And I'd promised him, hey, when we finish this ball game tonight, we'll go. The car was packed, but I didn't feel like going. It could be an 8-hour trip. It was already late, and now I would have to drive home as a loser. He'd have to drive 8 hours and not just sit with the loser, but he'd have to sit with the loser and the reason we'd lost. I didn't even change clothes. I took my cleats off, put my tennis shoes on, got in the pre-packed car, and we headed into the cold, dark Arkansas night. I didn't want to go. I didn't feel like going. I was miserable. And as I drove or rode beside Robert in the darkness, leaving that little town, I could hear Talia Shire from the Rocky movie say, just get rid of it. Because when all the smoke is cleared and everyone's through chanting your name, it's just going to be us. Well, it was just us. It was just a football game. And I needed for Robert to experience the hospitality of my home as I had been a guest in his home, and I needed to share the beauty of Cheehaw Mountain with him. And so you just decide to make the best of a bad situation, a bad situation that's going to get worse. Somewhere in Tupelo, Mississippi, Robert's car died. You see, he didn't want to take my car. He wanted to take his little car because he didn't trust West Wind, the legendary 1968 Chevrolet Impala, to complete this task. I drove West Wind from my junior year in high school all the way through maybe my second or third year in college. And that car never stranded me on the road. Now, sometimes it wouldn't start on campus. Sometimes it'd get you someplace and you'd have to have a little help to get back. But in between places, 14 trips to Arkansas and back, that car never stranded me on the road. Well, he didn't think West Wind was complete to the task, so we'd taken his little car. So now let's add insult to injury. I'm sort of on a trip I don't really want to be on, but I've decided it's a debt of honor. I just wanted to stay home and lick my wounds on campus. And now I'm not going to get to spend the weekend on campus. Apparently, I'm not going to get to spend it at home. Who knows how long it's going to take us to fix this car and get back. Little did I know, I was going to spend part of that weekend in jail. The car wouldn't budge. It was midnight in Tupelo, Mississippi, and so we just decided to wait till daylight. Robert wrapped up in a quilt that he had. I wrapped up in some clothes that I had brought, and we went to sleep. The rapping on my window woke me, and I stared into the flashlight of the largest human I'd ever seen. The gentleman's name was Officer Taylor Harris. He's wearing one of those Smokey the Bear hats. He was with the Tupelo, Mississippi Police Department. Yeah, after all these years, I still remember his name because his name badge was so high I had to look up to read it. He's an extremely muscular gentleman, and I still remember his name. We explained our predicament. We explained that, we were driving home and our car broke down and there was nobody to talk to, nobody to help us, so we just decided to spend the night in the car. And he explained in no uncertain terms that we could not sleep here and we'd have to move. So he left, and we pushed the car about 2 blocks into a parking lot and crawled in, wrapped up, went back to sleep. Apparently, his terms were actually uncertain because around 2 a.m., Officer Taylor Harris woke us up again. And what he had said was, you can't sleep here. What he meant was, you can't sleep in the car. Now, I'm not sure if it was because of some vagrancy law. I'm not sure if it was against some other law, or maybe he thought we'd freeze to death and he just didn't want us spending the night in the car. So not only now am I a loser, but I'm homeless in Tupelo. Now, there are no cell phones in those days, so you can't just, bunch some buttons and talk to somebody. You can't just, send out a text message. In Oxford, Alabama is the home of the Olympic worry champion. Not only am I homeless, not only am I a loser, but I'm also a missing person. Well, we did find a payphone, and I called home, and I corrected that status. Now, there was a time when there was just random phones hanging on the sides of buildings and the odd utility pole, and people just picked them up and drop coins into them like a slot machine, or they'd use a keypad to access an MCI or some version of a long-distance calling card. I see people freak out about using public toilets, but nobody ever gave it a second thought that you'd grab a phone that who knows who, carrying who knows what, had stuck to their face, breathed in it, and slobbered on it. And we just pick those things up and hold them in our faces and suck in the contaminants. It's a wonder we're not all dead or all of us are mutants. Anyway, I explained to Officer Taylor Harris in my most articulate manner that we were poor college kids and that we didn't have the money for a hotel. And even if we could find one within walking distance of this broken down car. He sort of brightened and said, well, boys, I've got a warm place you can sleep, and it won't cost you a dime. Now, the drunk tank in Tupelo, Mississippi was actually kind of cozy and not unlike my dorm room. It was small, it was contained, and other than the bars, it really wasn't a bad place to sleep. But sleep was unlikely. You see, in another cell was a drunken gentleman named Clifton. He was rattling on the cage with some kind of a cup or some kind of a coffee cup, and he was shouting, "You have me totally mistaken. I have not hurt anybody." We learned his name was Clifton when the guard yelled, "Shut up, Clifton!" At that time, the president of our university was named Clifton Gaines, a fact that we found fairly humorous, that we were spending the night in Tupelo, Mississippi jail with Clifton. Robert sat in his corner, wrapped in a quilt he'd brought from the car. I was in my royal blue Kingsmen jersey, complete with football pants and the infinity symbol for my number. Robert looked basically homeless, and I looked like a diminutive superhero, all out of place. I cupped my hands over my mouth and did my best imitation of a harmonica, and Robert began to sing, "Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow." The guard came by, and having some interest in law enforcement and hand-to-hand combat, I inquired about Clifton's particular situation. According to the guard, uh, he'd been arrested for assaulting a woman in a gay bar. I guess that's why he was yelling he hadn't hurt anyone, and he had been totally mistaken. And so I inquired, well, what arresting technique did you use to subdue this guy? He looked at me with kind of one of those weird, I can't believe this college kid's asking me this question. And he said, well, all that fancy scientific stuff is all right by me, but, and then he slapped the large mag light on his hip and he said, I just like a good flashlight. Robert quit singing. I quit playing the harmonica. At dawn, they released us. We walked the early morning frozen streets of Tupelo, Mississippi, Robert wrapped in a blanket looking like Clint Eastwood and me in my diminutive superhero costume. We found a garage and they towed the car, and actually before 9 a.m. we were on the road. We got to Oxford, Alabama, and we enjoyed a good adventure on Cheaha Mountain, some home-cooked food, and late Sunday afternoon, we began to journey back to school. After more car trouble, we finally returned to college after curfew, and our odyssey faded into history. In Robert's senior art show, Robert was a Bible major and an art major. He had a double major in Bible and art. I was trying to double major in Bible and art, but couldn't afford the art supplies, so I majored in Bible and minored in art. But in Robert's senior art show, he had this giant painting, and it was a version of the Indiana Jones poster. It showed Robert Swain of Altus, Oklahoma, now living in Valonia, Arkansas, and Lonnie Jones, and we were replete with fedoras. I was gripping a payphone in my hand, a whip, and a Kyber Bowie knife was slung over my shoulder, and the painting was emblazoned in those orange and yellow letters, Alabama Jones and Oklahoma Swain in the Tupelo of Doom. After our time at Harding, Robert would give me this painting. He'd present it to me as a wedding present, and it would hang in my office for many, many, many years. And it is a reminder. And it's a reminder of many things, not the least of which is my friendship with Robert Swain. But it's a reminder of a time, and at the time, it was not pleasant. The trip was frustrating, it was inconvenient, it was troublesome, and then a little bit scary, and at times we felt helpless. We weren't mechanics, and even if we'd been mechanics, we had no tools, we had no money, we had no resources, and we were at the mercy of other people, and those people showed us mercy. We slept warm in a bed that we couldn't pay for. The garage fixed the car and actually accepted an assurance from us to pay. We didn't have any money. We didn't have a credit card, but they just kind of said, hey, these kids will be good for the money. And actually afterward, my car insurance actually paid for the repairs because I had this rider on my policy that said it was roadside assistance. And since I had been a driver of this car at some point during the trip, they paid for our expenses. I'm still a State Farm customer. You look at this little adventure, and you might call it a tragedy. You might call it a comedy. You might call it an adventure. But I just like to call it an experience. Because you see, experience doesn't come with any kind of expectations. It doesn't have any connotations. Experience is not what happens to you, but what you do with what happens to you. And because of that, that's why I have been known to pick up hitchhikers, assist broken down bikers in the freezing rain. We've had bikers spend the night at our house when it was too cold and they were too tired to be out in the weather. It is why I choose to push cars out of intersections and pull cars out of ditches. It turns out that not only did we receive some kindness from the people along our travel, but it turns out the ballgame wasn't over. You see, this particular league we were playing in was a double elimination league, and our only loss had been the one that I'd created and contributed to. And so we got to play another game, and they let me play in the next game. They let me start at my position, even though I'd cost us the championship. And in this game, we did win, and we did win the championship. You see, I even know the value of second chances. I know the value of someone placing enough value in you, even when you have no value. You're in no position to pay them or pay them back. That's why when you have these kinds of experiences and you experience kindness and mercy, that's why you recognize I'll never be able to pay this back, but I pay it forward. You see, the kindness is shown to two college kids all those years ago are actually still paying dividends. Now, the people at the garage in Tupelo, Mississippi, and the police officer in the jail in Tupelo, Mississippi, and the insurance agent from Oxford, Alabama, they have no idea that because they helped us, we have in turn spent a lifetime trying to help others. And we do good, and we do the good we do not because we owe someone a debt, but simply because someone gave us a gift.